Robert had been running the Golden Spoon restaurant for 15 years. When he first opened the place, he was full of dreams and energy. He wanted to create a spot where people could come after a long day, enjoy good food, and feel at home. And for the most part, he succeeded. The restaurant wasn't fancy, but it had a solid reputation. People knew they could count on decent meals and friendly service. Things were good for a long time. Robert knew most of his regular customers by name. He'd walk around the dining room chatting with people, asking about their families. The staff liked working there too. Sure, Robert had his quirks, but he treated everyone fairly. He paid on time, gave Christmas bonuses, and genuinely seemed to care about the people who worked for him. But somewhere around year 12 or 13, things started to change. New restaurants kept popping up in the neighborhood. Fancy places with celebrity chefs and Instagram-worthy dishes. Food delivery apps made it easier for people to stay home. And then there were the costs. Everything was getting more expensive. The price of meat went up. Vegetables cost more. Even basic supplies like cooking oil and flour seemed to double in price overnight. Robert started feeling the pressure. He'd look at the monthly reports and see the profit margins getting thinner and thinner. Some months he barely broke even. The worry kept him up at night. He'd lie in bed staring at the ceiling, running numbers in his head. How much longer could he keep this up? What if he had to close down? What would happen to his family? The stress started changing him. He became irritable and short-tempered. Little things that never bothered him before suddenly felt like huge problems. A waiter breaking a glass would send him into a rant. A customer complaint, even a minor one, would ruin his whole day. His wife noticed the change. She tried talking to him about it, suggesting he take a vacation or maybe see someone about the stress. But Robert insisted he was fine. He just needed to work harder, be smarter, keep everything under control. Control became his obsession. He installed security cameras all over the restaurant. In the kitchen, the dining area, the storage room, even the employee break room. He said it was for security, but really, he wanted to watch everything his staff did. He'd sit in his office, staring at the monitors, looking for mistakes. If someone took an extra minute on their break, he'd notice. If a cook used a bit more oil than the recipe called for, he'd see it. He created new rules. Lots of them. Staff had to clock in and out for bathroom breaks. They couldn't eat any restaurant food, not even the stuff that was about to be thrown away. Personal phone use was completely banned, even during breaks. Anyone caught texting would get written up. 3 write-ups meant termination. The atmosphere in the restaurant changed completely. The staff, who used to joke around and actually enjoy their work, now walked on eggshells. Everyone was tense, afraid of making the smallest mistake. The friendly chatter in the kitchen disappeared. People just did their jobs in silence, watching the clock, counting down the minutes until they could leave. Jennifer had been the head chef at the Golden Spoon for 8 years. She was there before most of the current staff, back when Robert was still the friendly, optimistic owner everyone liked. She'd stuck with him through everything. When the dishwasher quit without notice and they were short-staffed, Jennifer worked double shifts without complaining. When they had that health inspection scare 3 years ago, she stayed up all night reorganizing the entire kitchen to make sure everything was perfect. She believed in Robert and the restaurant, but lately even Jennifer was feeling worn down. Robert had started blaming her for everything that went wrong. If food costs were up, it was because Jennifer wasn't managing inventory properly. If a dish came back to the kitchen, it was Jennifer's fault for not training the line cooks well enough. Never mind that she was doing the work of 2 people because Robert refused to hire adequate staff to save money. Robert started keeping a little notebook where he'd write down Jennifer's mistakes. Forgot to order extra parsley one time? Written down. A steak came out slightly overcooked during the dinner rush? Written down. Used the wrong brand of tomatoes when their usual supplier was out of stock? Written down. He never showed her this notebook, but she knew it existed. Other staff members had seen it. The thing was, Jennifer was actually a really good chef. Before all this tension started, customers regularly complimented the food. She had a gift for flavors and knew how to manage a kitchen efficiently. Several other restaurants had tried to recruit her over the years, offering better pay and benefits. But Jennifer was loyal. She felt connected to the Golden Spoon. She'd helped build its reputation. Walking away felt like abandoning something she'd invested so much of herself in. Her co-workers could see the toll it was taking on her. She'd lost weight from the stress. Dark circles formed under her eyes from lack of sleep. Her hands, steady and confident for years, sometimes trembled now when Robert was nearby, watching her work with those critical eyes. The other kitchen staff respected Jennifer immensely. They knew how hard she worked and how much she put up with. When Robert wasn't around, they'd try to cheer her up, remind her how talented she was, suggest that maybe it was time to look for something better. But Jennifer always shook her head. She'd been there 8 years. She couldn't just leave. Meanwhile, Robert's paranoia kept growing. He convinced himself that his staff was stealing from him, not because he had any evidence, but because in his mind it was the only explanation for why the restaurant wasn't making more money. It couldn't be the increased competition, or the changing dining habits, or his own poor management decisions. No, it had to be theft. He started doing surprise inventory checks at random times. He'd show up early in the morning or late at night, going through supplies, counting everything, looking for discrepancies. When the numbers didn't match his expectations, which happened often because inventory is never perfect, he'd interrogate the staff. Who used the extra chicken? Why are we low on rice? Where did that bottle of wine go? The employees started dreading coming to work. What used to be a decent job with a friendly atmosphere had turned into something miserable. People started quitting. First, the younger staff, the ones who could easily find work elsewhere. Then some of the experienced servers. Each time someone left, Robert didn't see it as a sign that maybe he was the problem. Instead, he took it as proof that people were lazy and disloyal. He'd complain to anyone who'd listen about how hard it was to find good workers these days. Nobody wanted to work anymore, he'd say. Everyone just wanted easy money for doing nothing. He never once considered that maybe, just maybe, he'd become impossible to work for. Jennifer watched all of this happening. She saw good people leave, people she'd worked alongside for years. She felt the tension getting worse every single day. But still, she stayed. She kept showing up, kept cooking, kept trying to hold the kitchen together even as everything around her was falling apart. She had no idea that everything was about to come crashing down in the worst possible way. Friday nights at the Golden Spoon were always busy. People came in after work, couples on dates, families celebrating birthdays. The dining room would fill up fast, and the kitchen had to move like a well-oiled machine to keep up with all the orders. Jennifer had handled hundreds of Friday nights before. She knew the rhythm, knew how to keep her team focused and efficient even when the tickets kept printing nonstop. This particular Friday started like any other. Jennifer arrived early to prep, making sure everything was in its place. She checked the produce delivery, organized the stations, and went over the specials with her line cooks. By 5 in the evening, the first customers were already being seated. By 6, every table was full and there was a waiting list. The kitchen was hot and loud. Pans sizzling, timers beeping, people calling out orders. Jennifer moved between stations, checking temperatures, tasting sauces, making sure every plate that went out was perfect. Despite all the tension with Robert, she still took pride in her work. When she was cooking, focused on the food, she could almost forget about all the stress. Around 7:30, right in the middle of the dinner rush, Jennifer's phone buzzed in her pocket. She ignored it. Robert's rules were clear. No phones during work hours. But then it buzzed again. And again. Something felt wrong. During a brief moment between orders, she quickly pulled out her phone and glanced at the screen. 3 missed calls from her daughter.
2 text messages.
The first one made her heart stop. "Mom, I've been in an accident. I'm okay, but the car is really damaged. I'm on the side of the highway. I don't know what to do. Please call me." Jennifer's hands started shaking. Her daughter was 19, still new to driving. She lived about 40 minutes away, attending community college. The thought of her scared and alone on the side of a highway made Jennifer's stomach drop. She immediately tried calling back, but her daughter didn't answer. She sent a quick text asking for the location and if she was hurt. The response came back quickly. "Near exit 47, car won't start. A police officer is here now, but I'm really scared. Can you come?" Jennifer looked around the kitchen. They were slammed. Tickets were backed up on the line. Her sous chef was sweating, trying to keep up. But this was her daughter. Her child needed her. There wasn't even a question in her mind about what she had to do. She found Robert in his office, watching the security monitors as usual. She knocked on the door frame. He looked up, annoyed at being interrupted. "I need to leave," Jennifer said, trying to keep her voice steady. "It's an emergency. My daughter was in a car accident." Robert's expression didn't change. He just stared at her for a moment, then looked back at his monitors. "We're busy. I know, but this is serious. She's stranded on the highway and she's scared. I need to go get her." "How bad is the accident?" Robert asked, still not looking at her. "She says she's okay, but the car is damaged and won't start. She needs me to come." Robert leaned back in his chair and crossed his arms. "If she's okay, then it can wait. We have a full house out there. You can go after the dinner rush." Jennifer couldn't believe what she was hearing. "That's not until 10 or 11. I can't leave her there for 3 more hours. Then she can call a tow truck. Or her father. Or a friend. You have responsibilities here." "She's my daughter," Jennifer said, her voice rising slightly. "This is an emergency." Robert stood up from his chair. "You know what I think? I think this is convenient timing. Right in the middle of our busiest night. Probably made up the whole thing so you could leave early." "What?" "No, I can show you the messages. Look." Jennifer pulled out her phone and tried to show him the texts. Robert held up his hand. "I don't want to see it. You know the rules. No phones during work. And no leaving during a shift unless I approve it." "I don't approve." Jennifer felt tears starting to form in her eyes, but they weren't sad tears. They were angry tears. After 8 years of loyalty, of covering shifts, of working herself to exhaustion for this place, he thought she was lying. He wouldn't let her help her own child. "I'm not asking for permission," Jennifer said quietly. "I'm telling you I have to leave. Right now." Robert's face turned red. "If you walk out that door, you're done. You understand me? Done. Are you seriously threatening to fire me because I need to help my daughter? I'm telling you what happens when you abandon your shift. We have a restaurant full of paying customers who expect good food. You're the head chef. You don't just get to leave because of some supposed emergency." "Supposed?" Jennifer's voice cracked. "You think I'm making this up? I think you've been looking for an excuse to leave. Everyone's been leaving lately and you're no different. Well, fine, go ahead. But you're fired. Take off that chef's coat right now and get out." Jennifer stood there stunned. The noise from the kitchen seemed distant, muffled. She'd given this man 8 years of her life. She'd sacrificed time with her family, missed her daughter's school events, worked through holidays. And this was how he treated her? "Fine," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. She started unbuttoning her chef's coat, her fingers fumbling with the buttons. But Robert wasn't done. His anger had fully taken over now. All the frustration and stress of the past months finding a target. "You know what your problem is?" he said, his voice getting louder. "You think you're irreplaceable. You think this place can't run without you. Well, I've got news for you. We'll be just fine." Jennifer pulled off her coat, revealing the t-shirt underneath. She felt exposed, humiliated. But then Robert made it worse. "Don't slink out the back like a coward," he said. "You walk out the front. Let everyone see what happens when someone abandons their responsibilities." He actually walked her out of the office, following her as she moved through the kitchen. The other cooks stopped what they were doing, confused. The sous chef looked at Jennifer with concern. "What's happening?" "She's quitting," Robert announced loudly. "Right in the middle of the dinner rush. Just walking out on all of you." "I'm not quitting," Jennifer said. "He fired me because my daughter was in a car accident and I need to go help her." "That's not what happened," Robert said. But Jennifer was already walking toward the dining room. She pushed through the swinging doors, and suddenly she was in the restaurant facing dozens of customers. People looked up from their meals, surprised to see the chef walking through in regular clothes, clearly upset. Robert was right behind her. "After 8 years of service," Robert said loudly, making sure everyone could hear, "some people still don't understand commitment, still don't understand what it means to be professional." Jennifer's face burned with embarrassment. People were staring. Some were whispering to each other. She wanted to disappear, to run out of there as fast as possible, but she also wanted these people to know the truth. "My daughter was in a car accident," she said, her voice shaking. "She's 19 and she's scared and stranded on the highway, and he won't let me leave to help her." The restaurant went quiet. You could hear the air conditioning humming, the soft background music playing. People's faces showed shock, confusion, disapproval. A woman at a nearby table pulled out her phone. A man shook his head slowly. "Get out," Robert said, pointing to the door. "Now." Jennifer walked toward the exit, tears now streaming down her face. Behind her, she could hear murmuring from the customers, but she couldn't make out the words. All she wanted was to get to her car, to get to her daughter. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely grip her keys. As she pushed through the front door and stepped into the cool evening air, she had no idea that she'd just witnessed the beginning of the end for the Golden Spoon. And she definitely didn't know that walking out that door, as painful as it was, would turn out to be the best thing that ever happened to her career. Behind her, in the restaurant, people were already pulling out their phones. Some were opening review apps. Others were recording videos, explaining what they'd just witnessed. One person had actually live-streamed the whole confrontation. Robert stood in his dining room, breathing hard, convinced he'd done the right thing. He'd shown everyone who was in charge. He'd maintained control. Now he just needed to get back to business as usual, but nothing was going to be usual ever again. Robert stood in the middle of his dining room, watching Jennifer leave. He expected to feel victorious, in control. Instead, he noticed something unsettling. The customers weren't going back to their meals. They were staring at him. Some were whispering to each other. A few were typing on their phones. He cleared his throat and forced a smile. "Sorry for the disruption, folks. Back to your meals. Everything's fine." But his voice sounded hollow even to himself. He turned and walked back into the kitchen, trying to project confidence. The moment he pushed through those doors, he knew something was wrong. His sous chef, David, was standing frozen at his station. The two line cooks looked panicked. Tickets were piling up on the rail, orders that should have been started minutes ago. "What are you all standing around for?" Robert demanded. "We have food to cook. Get moving." David looked at him with an expression Robert had never seen before, disgust mixed with disbelief. "You really just fired her for that? For a family emergency? That's none of your concern. Your concern is cooking these orders. Now move." "I can't do this," David said quietly. He untied his apron and pulled it off. "I've worked with Jennifer for 5 years. She's the best chef I've ever known, and one of the best people. What you just did? That's not right. You walk out that door, you're done too," Robert said, his voice rising. "I know." David dropped his apron on the counter and walked toward the back exit. Just like that, he was gone. One of the line cooks, a young guy who'd been there about 6 months, looked at Robert nervously. "I don't know all of Jennifer's recipes. I don't know how to run this station. Figure it out," Robert snapped. "You've watched her do it 100 times. The other line cook, an older woman named Rita, shook her head. "I'm not doing this. Not after what I just saw." She started untying her apron too. "You can't be serious," Robert said. But his voice had lost its authority. He sounded almost desperate now. "I'm completely serious. Good luck." Rita walked out the same door David had used. Now Robert was standing in his kitchen with one inexperienced cook and a pile of orders that kept growing. Through the window, he could see servers picking up the few plates that were ready, their faces stressed and confused. He could hear the ding of the bell as more orders came in. "Okay," Robert said, rolling up his sleeves. "Okay, I can handle this." He hadn't worked the line in years, but he used to be a decent cook. How hard could it be? Very hard, as it turned out. The kitchen had a rhythm, a flow that came from experience and teamwork. Without that, everything fell apart. Robert grabbed a pan, tried to start 3 dishes at once, got confused about which order was which. The remaining cook tried to help, but he was overwhelmed too. A server came to the window. "Table 7 is asking about their appetizers. They've been waiting 20 minutes. "Tell them it's coming," Robert said, sweat already dripping down his face. "Table 12 wants to know about their entrees. They ordered 45 minutes ago." "I heard you," Robert shouted. "Just give me a minute." But minutes turned into an hour and the situation only got worse. Robert burned a steak. Then he burned another one. A sauce separated because he forgot to stir it. He plated a dish and realized he'd forgotten the vegetables. Everything was chaos. In the dining room, customers were getting increasingly frustrated. Some had been waiting over an hour for their food. Others received meals that were clearly wrong or poorly cooked. A couple at table 6 cut into their chicken and found it was raw in the middle. They immediately got up and left without paying. A family at table 9 waited 90 minutes for their food, only to receive cold pasta and overcooked fish. The father asked to speak to the manager. Robert came out, still wearing his sweat-soaked shirt, grease stains on his pants. "This is unacceptable," the father said calmly but firmly. "We've been here for 2 hours. The food is cold and poorly made. My kids are tired and hungry." "We're having some staffing issues tonight," Robert said. I can comp your meal. Staffing issues? You mean firing your head chef in the middle of dinner service? The father's voice was loud enough that nearby tables could hear. Yeah, we saw that. Everyone saw that. You should be ashamed of yourself. Robert's face turned red. I don't need to explain my business decisions to you. No, you don't, and I don't need to eat here ever again. Come on, kids. We're going to get burgers somewhere else. The family stood up and walked out. Within the next 30 minutes, 4 more tables left. Some asked for their money back. Others just walked out, too frustrated to even complain. The few people who did receive their food were posting reviews on their phones before they even took a bite. One woman, sitting alone at the bar, was actually typing while filming herself. So, I'm sitting here at the Golden Spoon restaurant, she said to her phone, and I just witnessed the owner fire his head chef because she had to leave to help her daughter who was in a car accident. Now the kitchen has completely fallen apart, people are leaving, and I've been waiting an hour for a Caesar salad. Just a salad. This is insane. She wasn't the only one recording. Multiple people had pulled out their phones during the confrontation with Jennifer. Some had posted to social media immediately. Others were sharing videos in group chats, texting friends, leaving reviews. By 9 o'clock, Robert had to make a decision. The kitchen couldn't keep up. Orders were backed up for over 2 hours. He told the servers to stop seating people and to tell the remaining customers their meals were on the house. It was a financial disaster, but what else could he do? The servers moved through the dining room apologizing, offering free meals. Some customers accepted. Others were too angry and just wanted to leave. One elderly couple, regulars who'd been coming for years, told their server they wouldn't be back. We've always loved this place, the woman said sadly. But what we saw tonight, how that poor chef was treated, we can't support a business that treats people that way. By 10:30, the restaurant was finally empty. Robert sat in his office, surrounded by silence. The dining room, usually buzzing with life and conversation at this hour on a Friday night, was dark and quiet. He pulled up the tablet he used to check online reviews. His stomach dropped. In just 3 hours, the Golden Spoon had received over 30 new reviews. He scrolled through them, each one worse than the last. Witnessed the owner fire his chef for a family emergency. Absolutely disgusting behavior. Will never return. Worst dining experience of my life. Waited 2 hours for cold food. Owner screamed at staff. Avoid this place. The food was always mediocre, but at least the service used to be good. Now both are terrible, and the owner is apparently a horrible person. 1 star. 1 star, 1 star. The reviews kept coming, and they all said basically the same thing. People weren't just complaining about the food or the wait times. They were outraged by how Jennifer had been treated. Robert tried to tell himself it would blow over. People would forget, but then he saw something that made his blood run cold. Someone had posted a video. He clicked on it, and there he was on his phone screen, following Jennifer through the dining room, announcing loudly that she was unprofessional, that she was abandoning her responsibilities. The video had been posted 2 hours ago. It already had thousands of views, and the comments were brutal. This is why I always ask how restaurants treat their staff before I eat. There. Imagine thinking your business is more important than someone's child who was just in an accident. I hope this place goes out of business. Someone, please tell me the name of the chef so I can support wherever she goes next. Robert put down the tablet and put his head in his hands. His phone started ringing. He looked at the screen. It was his wife. He didn't answer. He couldn't talk to anyone right now. He just sat there in his office in the dark, listening to the refrigerators humming in the empty kitchen. He thought about Jennifer, probably with her daughter now, making sure she was safe. He thought about David and Rita, good employees who'd walked out because of his behavior. He thought about all those customers who'd never come back, and for the first time in a long time, Robert wondered if maybe, just maybe, he'd made a terrible mistake. But even then, sitting alone in his empty restaurant, he couldn't quite admit it to himself. This wasn't his fault, he told himself. People were overreacting. They'd forget about this in a week. He had no idea that the worst was yet to come. The viral video was just getting started, and by morning everything would be so much worse than he could possibly imagine. Robert didn't sleep much that night. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw those customers staring at him, heard their whispered conversations, felt the weight of their judgment. Around 3 in the morning, he gave up trying to sleep and grabbed his phone. The video had exploded. What had a few thousand views at 10 o'clock now had over 200,000. It had been shared to different platforms, reposted by food bloggers, picked up by local community groups. The comments section had grown into the thousands, and they just kept getting worse. Someone had even created a hashtag. It was trending in the local area. People were sharing their own stories of bad experiences at the Golden Spoon, things Robert had thought were forgotten or resolved. Old grievances were surfacing. Former employees were commenting, talking about how they'd been treated. Robert tried to respond to some of the comments, to explain his side, but everything he typed sounded defensive and made things worse. He finally put his phone down and tried to think. This would blow over, it had to. The internet had a short memory. Something else would grab people's attention in a day or two. He was wrong. By Monday morning, things had escalated in ways he never imagined. His phone started ringing at 7. It was the local newspaper. They wanted a statement about the incident. Robert declined to comment and hung up. Then a radio station called. Then a local TV news station. How is this news? Robert muttered to himself. But apparently it was. The story had touched a nerve. In a time when workers' rights and workplace treatment were hot topics, his very public firing of Jennifer had become a symbol of everything people hated about bad bosses. At 9 o'clock, his phone rang again. This time it was his landlord. "Robert, we need to talk," the landlord said, his voice serious. "If this is about the rent, it's only the 5th of the month. I have until the 15th. It's not about the rent. Well, not directly. I've been getting calls. People are upset about your restaurant. There's talk of protests. I've got other tenants in this building who are worried about their businesses being affected." Protests? That's ridiculous. This will all blow over in a few days. Maybe. But in the meantime, I need to think about my property and my other tenants. We should meet this week to discuss your lease. The call ended, leaving Robert with a sick feeling in his stomach. He got dressed and headed to the restaurant, hoping that actually being there and focusing on work would help. When he pulled into the parking lot, he noticed something odd. There were only 2 cars there. Usually by mid-morning, at least a few of his staff would have arrived to start prep work. He unlocked the door and went inside. The restaurant felt different, empty and cold in a way that had nothing to do with temperature. He checked his phone for messages from his staff. There were 3 texts, all saying basically the same thing. They quit. They couldn't work for him anymore after what happened. Just like that, he'd lost 3 more employees. That left him with 2 servers, 1 cook, and a dishwasher. You couldn't run a restaurant with that. He was standing in the empty dining room trying to figure out what to do when someone knocked on the glass door. He looked up to see 2 people in official-looking clothes holding clipboards. Robert opened the door. "We're not open yet, Mr. Peterson. We're from the health department. We're here for an inspection." "An inspection? I wasn't notified about any inspection." "This is a random inspection, sir. We don't always provide advance notice. May we come in?" Robert had no choice but to let them in. His mind was racing. The kitchen was always clean. He ran a tight ship. There was nothing to worry about. But his hands were sweating as he led them to the kitchen. The inspectors spent 2 hours going through everything. They checked temperatures, looked in storage areas, examined the equipment, took notes constantly. Robert followed them around, trying to explain or justify anything that seemed questionable. Finally, they finished. The lead inspector turned to Robert with a serious expression. "Mr. Peterson, we've found several violations. The walk-in cooler is operating at 43 degrees. That's above the safe temperature. We found evidence of pest activity near the dry storage area. Several of your food items are past their use-by dates, and there are cross-contamination issues with your raw meat storage." "Those are all minor things," Robert protested. "Easy fixes. They're violations of health code. Given the number and severity, we're issuing a temporary closure notice until these issues are corrected, and we can perform a follow-up inspection. You can't close me down. This is my livelihood. You'll receive all the information in writing. You have the right to appeal. But as of right now, this establishment cannot serve food to the public." The inspector handed him a notice and a long list of violations that needed to be corrected. Robert stood there holding the papers as the inspectors left. A temporary closure. The words echoed in his head. How long would that take? Days? Weeks? And how would he pay his bills with no income coming in? He needed to call his staff, the few he had left, to tell them not to come in, but when he tried calling, none of them answered. He left voicemails, sent texts. No responses. By Tuesday, the news about the health department closure had spread online. People were saying it was karma, that the universe was punishing him for how he treated Jennifer. The video kept being shared. Local food bloggers were writing articles about it. One popular blogger even started a "Where is Jennifer Now?" campaign, trying to find out where she'd gone so people could support her. Robert tried to focus on fixing the violations. He cleaned the entire kitchen himself since he had no staff. He called a refrigerator repair company to fix the cooler. He scheduled a pest control service. He went through all the inventory and threw out anything expired. It was exhausting work, and he was doing it alone. On Wednesday, his lawyer called. 3 former employees had filed complaints about workplace conditions. They were claiming hostile work environment. His lawyer recommended settling, but Robert refused. He hadn't done anything wrong, he insisted. People were just trying to take advantage of the situation. Thursday brought more bad news. His food suppliers were calling. His accounts were past due. He'd been so focused on the health violations that he'd forgotten about the bills piling up. He promised to pay them as soon as he could reopen, but they were skeptical. One supplier, someone he'd worked with for 10 years, said they were putting him on a cash-only basis. "It's nothing personal, Robert," the supplier said, "but we've seen the news. We're worried about whether your business will survive this. We can't extend credit under these circumstances." Friday afternoon, exactly 1 week after Jennifer walked out, Robert sat in his closed restaurant scrolling through social media. Someone had found Jennifer. She'd been hired as the head chef at the Riverside, an upscale restaurant across town that had been trying to recruit her for years. There were photos of her in her new kitchen, smiling genuinely for the first time in what looked like years. The Riverside had posted about their new chef, carefully not mentioning the controversy but making it clear they valued talent and treated their staff well. The post had thousands of likes and supportive comments. "So happy for her. She deserves better than that awful place. Can't wait to try the Riverside now that she's there. Already made a reservation. Supporting good people who treat their employees right." Robert felt something crack inside him. While he was watching his restaurant fall apart, dealing with health inspectors and angry suppliers and mounting bills, Jennifer had landed on her feet. Better than on her feet. She'd moved up. His phone rang. It was his wife. He'd barely talked to her all week, had been avoiding her calls because he couldn't face telling her how bad things had gotten. "Robert, we need to talk," she said when he answered. I know things are bad right now, but I can fix this. The bank called. We're behind on the mortgage. The restaurant loan is in default. We're in serious financial trouble. It's just temporary. Once I reopen..." "You're not hearing me. Even if you reopen tomorrow, can you recover from this? Will people come back? Do you have staff? Can you pay your suppliers?" Robert didn't have answers to any of those questions. For the first time, he realized the truth. This wasn't temporary. This wasn't something he could fix with hard work and determination. He'd done real damage not just to Jennifer, but to his business, his reputation, his life. "What do I do?" he asked quietly. His wife was silent for a long moment. "I think you know what you need to do. The question is whether you're ready to do it." Robert hung up and sat in the dark restaurant. The sunset was streaming through the windows, casting long shadows across the empty tables. He thought about calling Jennifer, apologizing. But what would he even say? Sorry didn't seem big enough, and maybe she didn't want to hear from him anyway. Maybe she was better off just moving forward without him in her rearview mirror. He pulled up the Riverside social media page again, looked at the photo of Jennifer smiling in her new kitchen. Then he looked around his own dark, empty restaurant, and finally, maybe for the first time, he understood what he'd really lost. 2 weeks after the health department inspection, Robert finally got his restaurant approved to reopen. He'd fixed everything on the violation list, paid for multiple inspections, and jumped through every hoop. The kitchen was cleaner than it had been in years. But standing in that spotless, empty space, he realized that fixing the health violations was the easy part. He had one cook willing to come back, and he'd managed to hire 2 new servers who didn't know about the controversy. It wasn't nearly enough staff to run a proper dinner service, but it was all he could afford. His savings were almost gone. The business account was overdrawn. He'd maxed out 2 credit cards just to pay the most urgent bills. Opening night after the closure felt surreal. Robert had posted on social media that they were back in business, but the announcement had more angry reactions than likes. Only 3 tables were booked for dinner. 3 tables on a Friday night in a restaurant that could seat 60 people. The first customers arrived at 6:30. An older couple who either didn't know about the controversy or didn't care. They ordered simple dishes, ate quietly, paid, and left. They didn't come back to the restaurant again. By 7:30, it was clear no one else was coming. Robert sent his servers home early and sat alone in the empty dining room. The silence was deafening. He could hear the clock on the wall ticking, the hum of the refrigerators in the kitchen, his own breathing. The following week was more of the same. A few curious people came in, probably wanting to see the restaurant from the viral video, but most stayed away. His regular customers, the ones who'd been coming for years, had disappeared. They were going to other restaurants now. Some, he'd heard, had followed Jennifer to the riverside. Meanwhile, the riverside was thriving. Robert couldn't help himself from checking their social media pages. They were completely booked weeks in advance. Food critics were writing glowing reviews of Jennifer's new menu. She'd brought creativity and passion that had been missing from her work at the Golden Spoon, probably because she'd been so stressed and controlled. One review particularly stung. "Chef Jennifer has truly come into her own at the riverside. Her dishes show a confidence and artistry that can only come from a chef who's finally free to express her vision. Every plate is a masterpiece, free to express her vision." Robert had never let her do that. He'd micromanaged every aspect of the kitchen, insisted everything be done his way, shot down her suggestions for new menu items. He'd been so focused on control that he'd stifled the very talent that could have made his restaurant great. By the end of the month, Robert had to face reality. He called his landlord and explained that he couldn't make rent. The landlord, who'd been patient enough already, gave him 30 days to vacate. His wife had been supportive through everything, but the stress was destroying their marriage. They'd had to borrow money from her parents. They were behind on their own house payments. She'd picked up extra shifts at her job, trying to keep them afloat. She never said, "I told you so," but Robert could see the disappointment in her eyes. He tried to sell the restaurant equipment to raise some cash. But word had gotten around. People knew he was desperate. They offered him pennies on the dollar. He had to take what he could get. One afternoon, while he was boxing up kitchen supplies, his phone rang. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer, but something made him pick up. "Is this Robert Peterson?" a woman's voice asked. "Yes. This is Patricia Moss from the Food Network. We're doing a segment on restaurant failures and workplace culture. We'd like to interview you about what happened at the Golden Spoon." Robert's first instinct was to hang up, but part of him wanted to tell his side of the story, to explain that he wasn't a monster, that he'd been under stress that people didn't understand. "What kind of interview?" he asked. "We want to talk about what went wrong, how a successful restaurant can fall apart, the role of leadership in restaurant culture. We'd like to interview you, and we've already spoken with some of your former staff, including Jennifer. I can't discuss other participants, but we're trying to present a complete picture." Robert agreed. Maybe this was his chance to redeem himself, to show that he was human, that he'd made mistakes but learned from them. The interview took place a week later. The producer asked him straightforward questions. Why did he fire Jennifer? What was he thinking in that moment? Did he understand now what he'd done wrong? Robert tried to explain. The stress, the financial pressure, the fear of losing everything. He admitted he'd handled it poorly. He said he regretted it. But even as he spoke, he could tell his words sounded hollow. Excuses rather than real accountability. "Have you tried to apologize to Jennifer?" the interviewer asked. "I wanted to, but I didn't think she'd want to hear from me." "So you never reached out?" "No. Why not?" Robert didn't have a good answer to that. The truth was he'd been too proud, too embarrassed, too afraid of her rejection. When the segment aired a month later, Robert watched it with a sinking feeling. They'd included interviews with Jennifer, David, Rita, and several other former employees. They all told similar stories of a workplace that had become toxic, of a boss who'd become paranoid and controlling, of people who'd felt undervalued and mistreated. Jennifer's interview was the hardest to watch. She spoke calmly and without anger, which somehow made it worse. "I gave 8 years to that restaurant," she said. "I believed in it. I believed in him. But somewhere along the way he stopped seeing us as people. We became just tools to be used, problems to be managed. The night he fired me, my daughter was scared and needed her mother. That should have been the only consideration. But to him, the restaurant was more important than anything else. More important than family. More important than basic human decency. The segment ended with an update. The Golden Spoon had closed permanently. Robert Peterson had filed for bankruptcy. Jennifer was now the head chef at the Riverside, which had just received a prestigious award for culinary excellence. Robert turned off the TV and sat in silence. They'd had to sell the house. He and his wife were living in a small apartment now. Their marriage was barely holding together. He'd applied for jobs at other restaurants, but his reputation preceded him. No one wanted to hire him. He thought about Jennifer constantly. How different things could have been if he'd just let her leave that night. If he'd said, "Of course, go help your daughter, we'll figure it out." That moment of compassion could have changed everything. Instead, his need for control, his pride, his inability to see past his own stress had destroyed everything he'd built. One evening, he drove past the Riverside. It was 8 o'clock on a Saturday night, and the place was packed. Through the windows, he could see happy diners, attentive servers, the glow of a successful restaurant. He sat in his car for a while, watching. He pulled out his phone and typed a message to Jennifer. He'd gotten her number from an old employee contact list. He typed and deleted several versions before settling on something simple. "Jennifer, I know this is probably unwelcome, and you have every right not to respond. I just wanted to say I'm sorry. Not because I want anything from you, but because you deserve to hear it. What I did was wrong. How I treated you and everyone else was wrong. I let stress and fear turn me into someone I'm ashamed of. I'm genuinely happy to see you succeeding. You deserved better than what I gave you. I'm sorry." He hit send before he could change his mind. 3 days passed with no response. Robert didn't blame her. He wouldn't have responded either. Then on the 4th day, his phone buzzed. "Thank you for the apology. I won't pretend it fixes anything, but I appreciate you saying it. I hope you figure things out. Despite everything, I don't wish you harm. I just wish you'd treated people better when you had the chance. It wasn't forgiveness, not really. But it was something. An acknowledgement." The closing of a chapter. Robert read the message several times. When you had the chance. That was the heart of it, wasn't it? He'd had chances. So many chances to be better. To treat people with respect, to value loyalty and humanity over control and profit. And he'd wasted every single one. 6 months after that terrible Friday night, Robert took a job as a line cook at a small diner across town. The pay was a fraction of what he used to make. The work was humbling, but the owner was kind. The staff worked together like a family, and slowly, very slowly, Robert started to understand what he'd been missing. He'd lost his restaurant, his reputation, his savings. But those weren't the real losses. The real loss was the person he'd become. The relationships he'd destroyed, the trust he'd violated. Money could be earned back. Businesses could be rebuilt. But the way he'd treated people, the pain he'd caused in that moment of anger and pride, that couldn't be undone. Jennifer went on to great success. Within 2 years, the Riverside had become one of the most celebrated restaurants in the region. She eventually opened her own place, built on principles of respect, collaboration, and treating staff like valued human beings. It was everything the Golden Spoon could have been. And Robert? He kept working at the diner, learning humility one shift at a time, carrying with him the expensive lesson that success without humanity is just a house of cards waiting to fall. One moment of cruelty had taught him what years of success never could. Some lessons, he learned, can only be taught by losing everything.